Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Hannon. I'm actually a certified enterprise coach with a major financial institution in Boston, but I also started the BU Agile Innovation Lab. And this is a great opportunity for us to talk about where does Agile go from here? So I want to introduce the panel. I don't think the person on your left needs any introduction, Dean Leffingwell. He will be on the panel. Michael Groves, who's the CEO of CollabWorks, and Sally Eder, who's the CEO of Agility Health. Okay? All right, so let's get started. I'm going to ask an initial question. And the question is, our goal here is, I was listening to the Agile Transformation seminar before this, and a lot of the things that we want to talk about, they talked about, but let's try to take a different spin on it. One of the things is we want to get to a business that has agility, or really practice business agility. So let's take it and throw it out there. Where do you see Agile going right now? And let's take it from there and sort of dive down deeper. Sally, do you want to
you know, when people ask me where is Agile going from here, I always think about where is the market needing, because it's never really about Agile, the method. It's really about what does the market need. And with COVID, I think all of us really just got a boot camp in agility, right? Had to learn whether an organization wants to. How do you respond quickly? How do you pivot? How do you learn? How do you deliver outcomes? How do you organize teams different ways so that you can get things done quickly, as in take, 30,000 people and have them work remotely? Or worked with the Federal Reserve Bank, and they said they had to process 1.2 million claims for PPP in a week, where they had never done that before. So I'm going to answer in that I think the future of Agile or agility is around organizing and delivering business outcomes as quickly as possible, and doing what we already know how to do better. So I don't think it's about adopting any new methodologies. I think everybody's worn out. I think people know what they need to do. They know the practices, the processes. And I think it's really about them measuring where they are today and improving and accelerating their transformation, doing it better. And a big part of that, in my opinion, will be developing talent. When I think about the talent that needs to be developed, I really think there's not going to be enough Agile coaches to coach all the teams. So you got to get down at the team level and develop the Scrum Masters, the product owners, the new managers, right? That their role has been distributed completely. The RTEs, there's a lot of data scientists. There's a lot of new roles that have to emerge to enable digital transformation. So that's my quick answer to the future of agility.
Great, thanks, Sally. Dean, did you want to chime in here?
Sure. Predicting the future is hard, I heard. And certainly in the last few months, we've learned that that's the case. As I reflected on the topic, I don't predict the future. I'm neither a psychic or a charlatan. What I do is try to understand the trends. And while I think in many ways we get tired of the word agile because it's agile, 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 agile. The reality is, I think we've just begun the journey. I think the future of agile is to really be agile. And that requires more than kind of the team constructs that I won't say we've mastered them, but we know how to be agile teams. We know how to create them. It requires an agile business. And I think the word agile alone, for me, doesn't get us quite far enough. I learned lean probably 2 decades before I learned agile, so it's just a part of me. The goal of lean is value in the shortest sustainable lead time. What future is there that is other than value in the shortest sustainable lead time? So as I work both externally and externally with some very large enterprises, many that have gone this journey for a few years. I talked to Scott Pruitt at CSG just last week. I think his 7th or 8th year. They've not mastered agility. Our company is small. We're pretty agile. The team I've been working with has been together a few years. We have many things to work on. I also think that we have to kind of return to where Agile started. Agile didn't start out with a daily stand-up and better defined roles and responsibilities, although that's huge. It started with a return to the basics in code. And I think you see that basics in code that started in XP now migrating its way into DevOps. So, for example, in our small enterprise and in the enterprises we coach, implementing DevOps is the way to get higher quality more quickly and to make sure that everything shifts left, whether it be whether it's compliance or security, quality testing, it all shifts left. So there's such a long road ahead of us as enterprises to really be good at Agile and Lean, that a future beyond that for me is really hard to envision. I think it's 2001, the manifesto. I think it's probably realistically, it was 2005, 2006 before I was deeply engaged. It's 2020. So we're 15 years into truly a mega trend, one that I think will last another 10, 20, or 30 years. We may not call it Agile, but when will we stop, try and get closer to the customer, applying customer centricity, applying design thinking, taking small batches through the system, and getting fast feedback from customers? I don't see us ever stop doing that. The label may change, but the principles of Agile and Lean will absolutely persist decades into the future, I'm confident.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Michael, I know you have a lot of interest in getting closer to the customer and defining the customer. Did you want to sort of add on to Dean and Sally's comments?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. By the way, your voice is a little quiet. I don't know if it's just me. I actually like first of all, a little bit about me. I've done 5 ventures, venture funded a couple of companies. I'm a CEO type, and I'm not an Agile expert, so I'm kind of a bird out of the water here. But what I see is and I was listening to the panel before as well. So I like the word adaptability. I think the trick at the corporate level is to be able to adapt quickly to changing market forces and things of that nature. And one of the frustrations I keep hearing is that, gee, the C-suite just doesn't get it, they're unable to move, blah, blah, blah. And I think the root cause, if you get down to what's the root cause, and we spent a long time now looking at this problem, and frankly, the root cause is what we all do. We got taught in MBA schools and so forth, which is to do financial modeling. So every year we figure out what's our revenue, what's our cost going to be, how many people can we afford, and then we do headcount planning and blah blah blah, and then we try to force down through the organization the command and control to execute. And so as long as we stay in that pattern, I think you're going to continue to get resistance of actually really trying to fully embrace the lean mentality unless there's a different way of thinking about managing. So our point of view is that we need to reinvent the way we think about managing. Instead of saying, well, how can we control people to get the right outcome? How can we instead motivate and get them turned on so they deliver the right outcome? And that we call that human-centric managing. And matter of fact, we formed a group this year called Human-Centric Labs to help promote that. And so I think if we start there and we develop a new framework, which we have done called Agile Management Framework, it works with the individual. And so you can now have the CEO experience this actual feeling of lean. How does the CEO themselves actually improve what they do? Who are their customers and how do they benefit from what the CEO is actually doing? So imagine now a world where actually at the individual level, this idea of lean management is pervasive. It's not just with engineering, it's not just around code, but it's around all forms of work. And imagine the ability to actually understand what the value of that work is and who actually is benefiting. In other words, who's the customer? And that's the trick to me to actually getting a model going where you can start to build a culture of continuous change. Once you have that culture, the ability for the classic Agile systems and so forth to promulgate, I think will really expand. So that's kind of my vision of the future. I'm feeling great that this is a wonderful community. I think that could help work with us to leverage it. So let's see what we can create.
Thank you. I want to hit on another topic, and we somewhat touched on this, is that we have a lot of things in Agile. We talk about scaling, we talk about leadership. Let's spend a few minutes on what is good. So what exactly do we consider good for Agile? What is the end state? So let's talk about, what do you think of the things that we can improve on? What do you think of the things we can change? Some real key bullet points. Dean, do you want to start us off?
Sure, I'm going to take off where Michael left off. So I've been doing in the business of these transformations for probably 15 years, large enterprises. companies early on that were innovators, and typically they were in a firefight, they were on a burning platform, to today. And throughout that, the common theme, if we bring in change agents, safe consultants, people, scrum masters, leaders, the common theme is our management doesn't get it. I spend a lot of time with managers and executives, and I think it's not fair to say they don't get it in some ways, and yet in some ways it is. And I think the big challenge you have is kind of the expertise and experience paradox. I was at a large financial institution in the world, and I was in basically amongst their senior leaders. And I started out with a note of respect and empathy. They've built one of the most successful companies in the world, and yet we're on the throes of a digital transformation that shakes the very core of that. So as they have their success and their experience, they become more and more confident in their ability, and that's good. And yet what happens is you become confident in your abilities to execute the things that got you here. Well, we've had almost a generational change in the people that we employ. The knowledge workers, as Drucker called them, some 30 years ago, are different. They're intrinsically motivated to do their work. And most of our employees now are not motivated for a career ladder. They need to know how they can grow, but they're motivated for doing interesting work. So having executives understand the new model and lead it is the longest pole in the tent. And that's where I spend my time helping executives understand what I went through. I mean, I grew up in my father he ran a trucking company, and the one thing he never said is, when he was giving instructions, how do you feel about that? That was not my dad. So a lot of us kind of grew up in that. We've become successful in some ways, very successful in some ways at doing that. But the next generation needs different support, and the industry demands us to really mine the enthusiasm and motivation of those people. So I think the longest pole in the tent, to use an idiom, is how long it takes our executives and managers to come on board and to think lean. And if you read, for example, Lean CEO, some books not really in the Agile space, you talk about this mental transformation that happens when inventory used to be good and now it's terrible. Well, same thing we have here. Big long-range plans used to be good, now they're terrible. Predictive plans for the future. I go to the board and say, this next year we're going to do this. That used to be good. Now it's the right board. It's going to say, what? I mean, that's a great set of plans, but how are you going to execute? We won't get to that next state without our leaders either retiring and doing different things, or coming on board to a paradigm that is quintessentially different in terms of the management paradigm. Taylorism, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the manufacturing engineer knew more how to put a part together. So he or she hired people and instructed them how to put parts together. Those days are gone. We have to go with it. But a lot of our executives, we are 40, 50, 60, and 70 years old. We have to make that transformation as well. I think that's the most difficult thing. Changing behavior is really hard. Changing the behavior of the most successful people that have built these companies is harder still. So I think if our focus on that, we'll win. It's not too hard to get a team to think Agile is better than not, but to get an enterprise to say, how do we allow mistakes? How do we innovate? If we're sprinting all the time, when do we stop and breathe? Those are the new mindset that we need the executives to have. And when they have that executive mindset, they'll lead that way, and the culture will follow. Culture follows. Culture does not lead. You lead with leadership and mindset, and the culture will follow along. So I think in a decade or so, a lot more senior executives in the global 2000 companies will get it. And they'll go, yes, we make mistakes and we learn. And our CEO, I have a great respect for, constantly says in the face of challenge, we'll get better at this. And that's what we need to do is have our leaders go, I'm learning Agile too. I'm reading. I'm a lifelong learner. Show them the stack of books, give them one, and say, this is hard. We're going to get better at this. I would say one of the most interesting things about this type of digital transformation is it changes everything. So when you approach an industry and say, how would you like to change everything? I don't even know if I want to change anything. So it's a really tough thing. We've got our shoulder against a very big boulder, and in the end, it's going to be beyond that ceiling where the teams and the programs and the directors hit their head to the leaders who go, I get this. We don't need those plans. We need to know what our budget is next year, make no mistake. But how I spend it remains to be determined. And I'm not going to decide in January exactly how we're going to spend all that money in December. So it's a mindset problem.
And also eating the proverbial dog food that managers need to do. So, okay, great. Thank you, Dean. Sally, did you want to add in some comments here?
Yeah, I think I'll just build upon what Dean just shared. I mean, I think the last comment that he made was, this is going to impact everything, is very real. And so people always come to us, obviously our specialty is measurement and continuous improvement, and they say, how do I measure? What does good look like? And the way we look at it is we say, think of enterprise agility as something that will impact team agility, team of team agility, organizational agility, and operational agility. If you think about these gears, we have them on our website, and we really look at those gears because they all impact each other. If I only focused on team agility, but I never focused on portfolio management and organizational design, or if I never focused on leadership agility, it just isn't going to work. And so, unfortunately, the times of let me just focus on team agile or even team of team agile program level are gone. You have to look and say and answer that question of, what does good look like? What does healthy look like? What does mature look like at the team level, at the team of team level, at the organizational level, which now includes portfolio outcome-based planning, organizational design, shifting to product management and not being in project mentality, and then operational agility. Honestly, that's where HR agility comes in. That's where finance, that's where marketing and sales and audit. In order for you to achieve business agility and to be nimble and to be able to compete in the market, you are going to have a strategy for all of those gears to work together. And you can't let up. Like, you can't say, oh, now we're all just focused on lean portfolio management and outcome-based design and let the teams fall apart. The team is actually the first gear, and it has to keep moving for the organization to mature. And so I think this answer to what does good look like really needs to be answered at all of those four areas with clear definition and an investment both in the teams maturing, the organization, and then the talent developing at every level.
Great. Thanks, Sally. Michael, did you want to?
Yeah, well, I'll just come right on after Sally here. And so I think it's not just about teams. I think it's about individuals. I think that when you actually need, and I would suggest that it's the work. It's the ability to actually value the work and understand who actually benefits from it, regardless of who you are in the organization. So think a little bit more in transparency. So it's not about the job per se or the teams, but something more fundamental, which is really what a person's doing. So for example, our companies that we've worked with here, if you look at their top talent, and you actually try to understand their top talent, it turns out they're only doing 30% top talent work. So, well, how motivated are they? So let me get back to the good news. So the good news is that corporations in general, and there's some exceptions, are not efficient. I think we'd all agree that if you think about the managing overhead that exists, and the more layers in the organization that you have of managing, and the more issues you have around how well they're managing, it all adds up. We're talking 30 to 40%, maybe as much as 50 and 60% inefficiency in the ability to actually get the right work done. Now, aren't I making common sense? That's common sense, right? So what are we going to do about that? That's the part that I think gets CEOs' attention. And what they're worried about is making the next quarterly number. They don't want to fall apart. Now, what's really cool in a really, unfortunately, ugly way is that COVID has caused companies to actually recognize that people can work differently and still survive. So now is a golden opportunity for us to jump through that window and show management that there's a way for us to actually empower people, to cause them to self-manage themselves more so that they can pick and choose, for example, where they work to get their best work done. If you do that and you have a feedback loop that actually shows the value change so you can actually start to measure and predict that people are increasing value for the corporation and that we're reducing the amount of wasted management, if you've got those metrics, the CEO will pay attention. And I believe that's what's required. We can't just take somebody to use an old phrase, an old dog, and teach them new tricks unless they can start to listen in the way that they're used to. And when they can see a better return, they're going to jump on board.
Excellent. Thank you. We talked about, and I know, Sally, you just mentioned it. Oh, Dean, did you have a question?
I do. I was going to kind of tag along that last comment. I think there is a trend that we as Agilists have to recognize that is a future trend, which is that there is no business agility without organizational and operational agility. And in the body of Lean, there are two basic types of value streams. There's the ones that we work in, building innovative solutions. I'm a software person, systems engineer. I love doing that. But if we get better and better at that, but the organization can't track and has basically operations that aren't as efficient as they possibly could be, then the value is not going to be delivered because you're not going to be able to support it, launch it, market it, or whatever. So what I am seeing is kind of a leak out, and I would guess Sally could support this as well, a leak out from technologists that are getting fairly good at kind of technical agility and even scale technical agility, starting to touch on the other areas. If marketing isn't agile, if sales isn't agile, if finance isn't agile, if budgeting isn't agile, if fulfilling an order isn't agile, if manufacturing isn't lean, you still don't have business agility. So I think the meta trend that we are seeing is we're starting to leak in, coach and help people understand their operational value streams, because those are the customers for our development systems anyway. I mean, a lot of us do stuff for the end users, a lot don't. A lot of us work on ERP or improve our WordPress platforms and things to do internal work. So I do think there's a trend here, which is we've got to get a little beyond the bits and bytes. The bits and bytes still empower everything, right? We innovate through our technology, but until the rest of the operational value streams are more fluid, we're still going to struggle to deliver value as quickly as we could.
Sally, did you want to comment?
I mean, I think it's, I was reflecting on the question that was just sent around, what does the end state look like? And that builds upon what Dean was talking about. I really think that sometimes, I also grew up in the software world. So I was a software engineer by trade and an architect, loved building systems, and I have transitions into the business world, partly because I'm a CEO of my own company and have to run a business that obviously you have to learn how to do sales and marketing and all of that and business development and product. But to be honest with you, I really started to think about all of these tools in our toolboxes are really here to enable the organization to win in the market. So we define business agility as the ability to adapt to change, learn and pivot, deliver at speed, and thrive in a competitive market, because gone are the days where large companies eat small. Today, a fast company is going to eat the slow. And that's the mission that's in front of us. It's not just to build better software. I think that as an Agile community, we need to realize that we are here to help organizations and businesses thrive in a competitive market, and many of them are going to be disrupted very soon, and they might even go out of business. And our technology background, our process background, our ability to organize teams around outcomes, businesses need that so they can thrive. So that's kind of really the end state, is better value, faster, with happier teams. And I think that's another important thing that agility brings to the table, is that your teams are more empowered, that they're happier, that they feel purpose-driven. They really feel like they're attached to why we are doing what we're doing. I'm not just building more widgets and building them faster. I understand why I'm doing, and you are unleashing my creativity. You're asking me, what are your ideas? Here's the problem I'm trying to solve, and it's a business problem. And I know you're a technical person, but I need to hear from you. How would you solve this business problem through technology, through innovation, or through your ideas, and kind of unleashing that power? That's the only way large companies are going to be able to thrive in the future.
Excellent. And I think we do have a question I'm going to interject here. Dean and Michael, if you want to opine on this. When you talk to management, they say, what's the end state? Where am I going? So how would you suggest that someone who is either in a transformation or talking about a transformation address that?
I take it, Dean.
Go ahead, Michael.
Again, I start from the executive level. And so we talked about fear, and it's true. So what people want is data. They want feedback loops. They want to see that if they experiment on something and it works and they can expand on it, then it's proven, then they're going to rely on that and they're going to evolve. And so the question is, how do you get at that? And let me give you an example. We work with a Fortune 50 company where an engineering group of 250 people came up with 165 ideas for improvement, okay? So there's plenty of people with lots of innovation. And by the way, those ideas weren't just engineering problems, right? And they formed 21 teams, not which were all formal Agile. Matter of fact, one of the problems that came up was, in fact, the way they were running Agile. But in 18 months, they improved their productivity by 12.9%, okay, as measured by the value that this economic model produces. And in fact, their engagement levels improved by 33%. Now, why? Because people actually were listening to what they saw was in the way of their success. And they were allowed to create projects, and the company invested in their solution, partly for themselves to increase their own capability, and also for the teams to uprising the organization is part of what I think the equation is. And so we have to allow each individual to be lean, each individual to be agile, and to grow their own talent, and then to know that we've actually in fact grown it. So you can tell that's where my passion is at. And I think that's the next extension of Agile. It's really when you combine that with the individual, I think you're going to get a lot more pervasive use.
There's no end state, but I'd suggest that there's a persistent one, right? So the journey we're on in lean and agile has no end. And that's one of the things I love about lean is that you're never too lean, right? You never have inventory turns that are too low. That's impossible. I think the end state is a persistent state called a continuous learning culture. So I used to tell stories, and I don't tell them so much anymore because it tends to hurt people's feelings. But when you walk into a developer's office and look at their desk, now admittedly it's all online now or on Kindle, but there's books and books and books and books. And when you walk into an executive's desk, let's say you're escorted in by an executive administrator, and you sit down and talk to that executive, there are books, but there might not be any open on the desk. They might be very nicely arranged on the back. And this is part of that expert conundrum that executive is crack open the book again. And there are so many, a dozen right now, that would shake an executive to their boots in terms of rethinking things, from Dan Pink's work to Flow to going back to Ward, et cetera, that would really start them thinking about, we have to learn, because we don't know what's next. We don't know post-COVID. We don't know what models are next. We don't know what mega trends or new labels are going to learn Agile. We have to learn continuously. We need to culture this learning continuously. And I think the best environments I've seen and I've been brought in by browsing and Kindling, he or she will learn new things. They become almost annoying. It's like, okay, what did you read this weekend? But we're going to move forward. So that state persists. That will last. No matter what other trends hit you, if you have a culture that's always learning and always growing, always testing, always trying, you're going to be great. You're going to survive in any age, digital age or the age of steel. If you don't have that culture, the learnings that you had that got you to where you are no longer adequate for the future state. So it's relearning and new learning that will really guide the executives and the employees down that path.
Excellent, thank you. I do work with Agile Scrum, and that's another basic component, that everyone's a teacher, everyone needs to learn, and that's so crucial. And sort of the next question is, as we go through this continuous improvement and we try to change the culture, can you folks actually opine on what do you think the importance of servant leadership is? Exactly, and if you can give some examples, that would be great. Sally, did you want to go first?
Sure. Continuous improvement is very dear to my heart. And I think that role of the manager is really one that we all have been to address very well as an Agile community over the years. I think we've done a great job trying to transform the teams. And I think that we've done a great job transforming some of the executives and convincing them of why this is important for them. But the managers feel very lost. And even when we throw out the word servant leadership, they get even more lost because they don't understand. I've seen managers move from completely just being a servant and not making any decisions because they're like, I'm trying to practice servant leadership. And they just kind of sort of get stuck and they're like, I don't know what my new role is. You haven't defined it for me. So I'm going to give my answer, which is really more from a continuous improvement and measurement. A lot of what we do with organizations is help them understand and get a baseline of where their teams are at right now. And obviously we use our platform, Agility Health. What comes out of those baselines from the teams are team improvement items where the teams need to improve. But what comes out really like drastically is organizational improvement backlogs. These are things that the teams themselves from their voice are saying, if you want us to be better, if you want us to be faster, if you want us to deliver higher value, here are the issues that we want you to solve for us. So to me, servant leadership is when you can train your managers and your middle managers so that they can actually listen to the voice of the teams, where they can actually make it a priority for them to be data-driven and remove these obstacles that are coming directly from these teams and actually be adding value and be part of the transformation by accelerating those teams' performance. So I think we focus so much only on the theoretical definitions of servant leadership, which is autonomy, empowerment, enable decision-making, provide a safe environment, psychological safety. That's all awesome. But for me, I feel like, because I see this problem very real, once we have data across the teams, we really do have an improvement backlog that I need the managers to focus on. And to me, that's the heart of servant leadership. If you're not going to, as an executive, allow your managers to dedicate time away from firefighting and operational and responding to issues daily into improving the organization based on what the team said, then I don't think we're practicing servant leadership. So that's sort of my 2 cents to it.
Excellent. Michael, did you want to add?
Yeah, I could chime right in on that. I think that's absolutely right. Had an inefficiency that already exists in most of these organizations. The message at the C level basically is you've got to allow the organization to actually spend a certain amount of their time continuously improving at both the individual and at the team level. And so you need to allocate a certain percentage of full-time equivalent across the organization and then hold them accountable for the actual improvements that take place and measure the fact that there's a real benefit and a real return. And when you get into that process, that's the continuous process that starts to eat away at the overhead, gets much more focused on customers, much more flatter, if you will. And we have too is that anyone can be a leader. So we believe that organizations need to be more and more transparent around away from titles where it allows anyone to step up and take a leadership role in a problem. And so we really, when I talked about those 165 problems in the 21 projects, 80% of those projects were led by non-managers, in some cases lower level people who had passion on solving the problem. And that's what the millennials, when we talk about the new people coming in, they don't want to be stovepiped into a job. They want to be able to express themselves and be able to actually reach out and learn in different parts of the organization and so forth. So we need to start to relax the boundaries and barriers of job descriptions and get more into problem solving and really allowing more fluidity in the organization, which was back to what the previous panel was talking about, which is, how do you create lots of little micro business inside? You do that by listening to the people who have the passion and leadership to make change and then empowering them.
Great, thank you. Dean?
So servant leadership is a really interesting topic. And if you read the original works, it truly is servant leadership. This is leader who sits in the background and facilitates a process where others do the work and get a credit for the work. I totally appreciate that. But I think when you think about flow and the paradigm of flow is supported by good decision making, and certain types of decisions have centralization properties, right? If we're moving into a new building, I can't pull a few hundred people and say, how would you like to move into a new building? Some people are going to decide and they're going to sign on the dotted line and they're going to put their careers at stake for paying that bill. So servant leadership is a style of leadership that's particularly helpful when we're trying to empower others, because it's kind of the other extreme. There's servant leadership and leader of servants, okay? So servant leadership is probably the better side of that. But I think it comes down to decision making. And I think we've seen very effective leaders who I wouldn't characterize as servant leaders who make good decisions. I think that the goal is to learn how decisions are made. And I think in a pure in a pure collaborative environment, it can be very difficult to get those decisions made. A consensus is not unanimous. That means that somebody could still filibuster. So I think we need good, solid decision making. We want that decision making to take place when the decision isn't obvious, when the team couldn't come to agreement, or when there's some strategic change that frankly affects people and they don't like it. So some of the decisions that you make as a CEO, and we're talking to CEOs here, are not things that your people want to do. I remember moving our business out of one domain into another. I'd recruited a lot of people in that former domain and they didn't really want to go. So if I was a true servant leader, we wouldn't have left. Maybe I made it the wrong decision. It turned out it was the right decision for the company. So it's about good decision making, and good leaders make good decisions, and they do that by empowering people. They listen, for sure. Lots of decisions they don't have to make. Maybe 95% of the decisions they used to make, they don't have to make, but some, we're moving a building, we're entering a new market, we're getting out of that business, we're decommissioning that product or whatever. Some of those are tough decisions that are not going to be supported across the board. Somebody has to decide. So I think leaders can be strong and good decision makers and be servant leaders at the same time. But the pure theory of servant leadership, which is that those decisions will naturally emerge, a consensus will emerge and be executed on, I haven't seen that work out as well as I thought the books might indicate.
Great, thank you. We do have another question, which I'm going to interject with now. The question, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, revolves around the fact of we request certifications for different types of roles. But we look at it also from a perspective of the transformation. The biggest issues are around leadership. So, and if I'm not understanding this correctly, is there an issue with too many roles, too many certifications? So if folks can sort of talk about that, what are your thoughts? Dee, do you want to go first?
Sure. Another fun topic. Let me just give you an example. So one of the enterprises that I worked with, started maybe 8 or 10 years ago, took one of our courses. It was a course designed for leaders. It was the only course we had at the time. And they had everybody take it. And the leader of that company is really a personal friend, and he's the other end of command and control. He does not mandate much of anything. He had everybody take the exam to be certified in that role. So I asked him about that once because it wasn't even the right course for everybody. And he said, I'm a change leader here. We're changing our way of working. It's really important that our people know what that way of working is. It's not optional to continue the old way of working. How do I know that they've taken the time to learn the new way of working? We have them take the class and take the test. Now, is that a badge of certification prowess? No, but to that leader, it said, look, we've had 400 people now go through the program and take an exam, and they're certified. Does he care if they're certified? Not at all. He cares that they have the knowledge, that it didn't fall asleep in the class. They actually took the class, and by the way, they can track that. So with their learning management system, they could say these people have taken the exam. And passing was not the critical item. Everybody took the class, and people took the exam. There's no hammer at people's heads if they did or didn't pass it. I think as Cotter would teach us, Change Management 101 basically says if you want people to behave differently, you have to show them what that new behavior is. So certain things like, data privacy, people have to know that. We have a data privacy officer. That's certainly more than the 3 roles we see on the right. So I don't think it's about certification. I think it's about learning. And in the absence of any way to really understand learning in a meaningful way, we can't observe on the job. We can't follow somebody into the job and observe it. We can ask a question. Right? Do you understand the training? I had to take the exam because it's really critical to me that I understand what that act means and make sure that we operate in accordance with the laws of the state of California, which will probably soon be everywhere. So it's not about the cert per se, although many career roles are very augmented by that. It's about the learnings. If there's a way to get learnings without cert, great. Why are there so many certifications? Because there's so many different things to learn. So if I'm a developer and I've never learned about DevOps, is that valuable? I think it is. Is an exam necessarily the discriminator? Not necessarily, but I need to learn about DevOps. Scrum Master certifications have been with us forever because they basically say this person has been trained and probably proctored and mentored in implementing this new style, this new way of working inside the enterprise. So it's about the learning. It's not about the cert per se.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Michael, did you want to opine on that?
I'll just add a little bit to that, which is so I'm agreeing with what Dean said. I think the other aspect, though, I think which is really important, again, back to the new generation of people. I have two sons, by the way, who are millennials and so on. And so it's important that what they want to learn as well. So there's certain things that you need to learn, but there's other things that if you can allow them to take initiative and to learn and so forth, you get them turned on, you get them motivated. So I think, again, back to this kind of bubble up approach of listening and trying to align the interests of the individual, which we call human-centric, with the organizational needs. If you're really trying to focus in on that, you'll see that there's a lot of change that could happen, for example, around career development. People, like you said, don't want to actually just end up with a 25-year gold watch. That's no longer going to be the plan, right? So the question is how to motivate people to want to learn in different aspects. And this is where the teams have to become much more agile, in my opinion, in terms of their formation, their length of duty. The more framework you put on it and the heavier the framework, the less you're going to be able to actually allow this to promulgate across the organization. So I think if I had to say one last thing that just came into my head right now about the future of Agile, and I'm not an Agile person, as you can probably tell, is that we got to let go and allow that there's other frameworks that can come in to complement the current Agile framework that are easy to implement, that require very little training, very little interest, and basically allow a lot of change and dynamics in the organization, one of which is this whole notion of learning.
Excellent. Sally, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think both of them hit it well, and I want to emphasize what Dean said about it's not about certification, it's about learning, and just having a way to measure how much have we learned and grown.
Great. I'm going to ask one final question, and we've started to take questions from folks. But if you sit back, Agile is starting to move in other areas. We get your opinion on where is it moving, where should it move, and are there some exciting areas that you see out there? In particular, we have Agile in education, different areas. Is there anything that you see is really appealing right now? Sally, did you want to start us out?
Sure, it's all appealing because it needs to go, and I'm really going to talk about agility, not just Agile, because I don't want people to think about when I say Agile applied to HR, I'm talking about an HR team doing Scrum or Kanban or having a daily stand-up. I'm talking about agility. I'm talking about them pausing to lean out their process, to think about what product and service do they actually offer, who is their customer. One of our customers was Gap, and I remember their HR team did, they called it the one-day hire. That was going to be one of their new products. So they took product management and applied it to HR and said, how can we are competing in Silicon Valley with everybody, how can we hire somebody in one day? What would that process look like to lean out everything that we're doing? So yes, they use Scrum, yes, they do design thinking, but it wasn't about applying, Scrum and Kanban and having a daily stand-up and using stories. It was about rethinking how HR works and making it more nimble and be more value-driven. And so it's HR sales. Our sales team and many sales team are now using Agile as a way of creating a cross-functional group that knows how to deliver and sell and have weekly goals and monthly and learn from each other. So it's really, I think it's really exciting. And I'd like to see agility cross every part of the organization, because you are always as slow as your least agile part. You got to think about it. Remember those gears that I talked about? All of the gears feed into each other. So if there's one gear that's slow and not moving, it impacts your value stream. It impacts your end-to-end delivery of value. So it's all exciting. I am, very excited about HR because I think that they've been missing in the table, and I think that their transformation to agility will enable the rest of the organization. But all of them are exciting.
Some great points. Thanks, Sally. Dean?
I think it comes back to the, Agile as a team thing is an extraordinary thing. I mean, I sit here today because I like working on an Agile team more than any other way of working I've ever had. So I respect my team. They respect me. We have each other's back. It is in 2002 or 2003, I joined my first Agile team. That's extraordinary. That scales. right? I don't care where you are, what business you're doing. Being on an Agile team that knows how it works is really, really valuable. When it comes to the enterprise, however, you've really got to kind of look at the end-to-end. You've got to look at full value stream. So I think where Agile goes is helping the enterprise understand how to make more efficient value streams. Because if the value stream isn't efficient, it can't change very quickly. I want to put some new value and I can't because I have such an inefficient value stream. So I would look to lean thinking and value stream thinking as one of the ways to start thinking about how to really apply some of the Agile practices at the team level all the way through the enterprise. Think about the operational value stream. Think about what it takes to get from the customer order to cash, and you have a whole new body of knowledge that will get us out of the daily stand-up mode, which is definitely a gear in that piece, and get us into the daily reconsideration of how efficiently value is flowing through our enterprise.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Michael?
I think I'm right on the value stream approach as well. I think, and I think there's an incredible opportunity right now, which is a way people are going to work. So we've been quite into this whole process of workplace. And so when you actually think about, where are we going post-COVID, right? So how many people are going to come back to work in the office? How many are going to stay at home? How many are going to compromise and so forth? And there's a perfect example of being agile in terms of the way we solve that problem. If you do the traditional command and control, you might say, well, everybody has to come in 3 days a week, or somebody comes in full time, or you don't have to come in at all. But that's a crude approach. That doesn't take into account what the individuals need, and it doesn't take into account what the teams need. So there's a golden opportunity right now to really demonstrate at the executive level that we can actually now reinvent the way we manage people by allowing people to have more choice and for them to be adults and them to be able to demonstrate increased value, not the same old value, increased value, by actually working in a different, more unique way that optimizes their best work. And I think that's a golden opportunity for us to all focus if we want to try to create a major
question. The role of the business analyst, which I can, is near and dear to my heart because it always seems like you have issues with this. Has there been any experiences about the role of the business analyst in the Agile teams you've had? And how do they actually play the role of the product owner, things like that? Or do they? Dean, you want to start us out?
Yeah, hundreds and thousands of experiences, and some really successful and some not. Probably a true bell curve. I think the business analyst is a role that was described for somebody that understood the business, talked to the business owners who were running the business processes, and could actually not be laughed out of the IT office, right? But it was never a role that really owned the solution set. Product owner is a bold statement. I mean, you got to give Scrum credit for going out bold. A product owner is not an analyst. They don't think about things, and they don't provide data for others to act on. A product owner takes decisions. So when business owners step in between the business and the technology and say, I'll assume the responsibility for these decisions, and I've got my business partner on the side and the IT on the side, that's great. If they continue to authorize by simply providing data and not taking decisions aren't taken. They float between the enterprise, and IT builds what they think they should build, and the business goes, well, why wasn't that the thing? So I think a business analyst that's product focused, that it's to Kirsten's work, project to product, is a really powerful role, and BAs can fill the role or not based upon whether they want to stand up and say, I'm prepared to make the decision here. I'll be criticized for that, and I'm going to say no a lot, because when you say yes all the time, nothing useful happens. So I've seen it be very successful, and I've seen it not. But it's not about whether it was a BA, it's about the person in the role and whether they really want to take responsibility for making the decisions, because neither IT nor business make the decision independently. Somebody has to say, I weighed all the factors. We can deal with this technical debt or we can't. We're going to make this new feature or we can't. Here's what we're going to do, folks. So it's an empowered role. It's a really exciting role. I mean, I think in a way I'm a frustrated product manager throughout my entire career. I tried to product manage stuff and help get it out the door. So yes and no. It's kind of like, can project managers be good Scrum Masters? Yes and no.
Exactly. We have one other question, Sally, if you don't mind fielding this one. It's a question about posture. Is good leadership about being in the posture that the team needs at that point in time?
What does that mean, posture? Like, what do you think that means? I saw the question.
Yeah, it seems that the posture of how the leader actually takes, are they at the point where they have certain characteristics that they need? Does the leader sort of morph itself into the posture that they need?
Got it. I think that any smart leader, agile leader, should know where their team is in terms of their maturity and know if the team is forming. Leaders might need to lean in a little bit at the beginning and help them with clarity on vision, help them define, the core values and the norms, the working agreements, help them identify how are they going to work with each other. When my team is storming as a leader, I come in really as a coach, right? So you want that leader to come in as a coach and be a harmonizer and help resolve some of not resolve the conflict, but help them understand how to manage conflict, how to have crucial conversations with each other. When my team moves to norming and performing, I need to take a couple steps back. I need to nudge them. I need to empower them. I need to enable more decision making. So I do think that as a leader, just saying I'm always a disengaged leader because I'm always in empowering mode, I'm just going to let the team figure it out, not realizing where my team is in my maturity. Did the team just get stood up? If the team just got stood up and they don't know what they're doing and they don't have clarity and they don't even know how to get along and they're starting to become some personality fights, I'm going to lean in just a little bit more to help with that. So yeah, I do think that the leadership posture or behaviors should reflect where the maturity of the team is.
Okay, great. Folks, thank you very much. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Michael. Any final comments anyone would like to make?
For me, it was a great exercise. It was a pleasure to meet you guys. I appreciate being invited, Jim. And the only regret I have is that we didn't get to hear more about you and your own views.
It's not about me. It's about you guys. I was just the moderator. So again, thank you.